And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 30th day of March 2022. Well, it is a beautiful day out here in Brisbane at this point in time, but the temperature today is 70 degrees, and the forecast is for patchy rain throughout the day. So, that's what it's going to be looking like. Well, what's going to happen today is we will do the news segment now, and we'll finish off by joining into the Parliament House and see how the session is going there as well. But of course, we all know that the very, very big news at this point in time has been the federal budget. Let's take a look at that.
You'll be better off after the budget. Cost of living relief is front and centre. It starts with respite of the petrol pump. Fuel excise will halve for 6 months, saving around $15 on the average tank. 6 million Australians will receive a one-off $250 cost of living payment in cash, including pensioners, carers, concession card holders, veterans and job seekers. It'll hit your bank account next month. More than 10 million low and middle income workers earning up to $126,000 a year will receive $420, but not in cash. It's a tax offset to claim at tax time, added to the existing $1,080 tax offset from July 1. Small business wins too, with extra tax deductions on staff training and digital technology costs. Single parents will be able to access 20 weeks paid parental leave. There's help for first-time home buyers with additional places in the Home Guarantee Scheme. New apprentices will receive $5,000, and employers who take them on will get wage subsidies. All in all, the economy is in pretty good shape. Government forecasts point to higher than expected economic growth. Unemployment falling to 3.75% before the end of the year, and wages growth increasing by 3.25%. Look, my takeaway is most Australians will be better off, and it should help with immediate cost of living pressures. Of course, the Coalition is also hoping it'll help them win votes at the upcoming election.
After the pandemic pounding, the Treasurer now celebrates the economic rebound.
Our recovery leads the world. This is not luck. Our economic plan is working.
Declaring a $100 billion budget turnaround, $30 billion of it already spent. $8.6 billion on a cost of living package, including $250 through Centrelink for pensioners, carers, veterans, job seekers, some self-funded retirees and concession card holders. As well, extra money at tax time for workers. A $400 increase in the tax offset to a maximum $1,500 for those earning up to $126,000.
Under the Coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
Petrol prices will be lower too, a 50% cut in the fuel excise, taking 22 cents off a litre for the next 6 months, saving $15 a tank. Prices falling over the next 2 weeks. For petrol stations that don't, heavy fines.
The ACCC will not hesitate to take appropriate enforcement action.
The unemployment rate's predicted to fall to 3.75% mid-year, the deficit falling to $79.8 billion this year, $78 next, and more spending on national security, $9.9 billion over 10 years, bolstering cyber defences and weapons.
The biggest ever investment in Australia's defensive and offensive cyber capabilities.
Inflation is expected to peak way below market predictions at 4.25% this year, falling to 3% next financial year, then 2.5%. Wages are expected to rise from 2.75% to 3.25%, delivering the first real wage rises in a decade. Labor says they've heard these promises before.
What's missing from the budget is a plan that goes beyond May. The government's got a budget which is entirely geared for the next 6 or 7 weeks.
It's a budget that talks long but is full of short-term money for almost everyone. Not so much a budget that brings home the bacon as much as one trying to save the government's bacon.
This is not a time to change course. This is a time to stick to our plan.
One thing that can derail the plan, a new COVID variant wreaking havoc. The budget predicts another Omicron wave at winter, putting pressure on jobs and supply chains. And if there's a new variant of concern, that will wipe $11 billion from the economy.
But we remain in very uncertain times. The aftershocks of COVID are real.
Josh Frydenberg says the financial coordinates are good,
Our budget has turned the corner.
hoping the government avoids the exit as it heads towards the polls in just 2 months' time. Mark Riley, 7 News.
And there you go, the budget special. I thought I'd begin with the budget so that, everyone gets an idea of what's in there. So there's lots that is coming everyone's way, especially that cut on the fuel exercise, bringing it from 44 to 22 cents, which is a 50% reduction in that exercise TT, which is good news. Well, right now, let's look at some other news. What about that allegations that the Prime Minister, people don't have to agree with Prime Minister as he mentions on that allegations.
Oh, well, look, I understand that Connie is disappointed that as 500 members of the Liberal Party came to select our candidates for the Senate at the next election, that she was unsuccessful. They chose Senator Payne and Senator Molan, also great choices, and I congratulate them on their success at that selection. There are disappointments in politics. My predecessors, both of them in fact, have also earned similar accusations, maybe not exactly put as like that, but people get disappointed. But if there are serious issues that Connie would like to raise about these things, then we have processes in our party. We put them in place. Those lessons have been learned over a long time now, and they're there, and I would strongly encourage her to take any matters up with the party organisation. That's the right thing to do.
But it's not just her, of course. You've got lots of fire from inside your own team over the years. Gladys Berejiklian, in those texts, described you as a horrible and untrustworthy person. A senior minister has described you as a fraud and a complete psycho. The Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce, has called you a hypocrite and a liar. What should voters make of all of this?
Oh, look, as Prime Minister, you make decisions that people don't always agree with you on. And particularly, the Premier Berejiklian at the time and since has never confirmed any of those things. And so scuttlebutt goes around. But it is true that I will make decisions that not everyone will agree with. And when they don't, they'll be disappointed. But that goes with being Prime Minister. If you just want everybody to like you all the time, then you won't be a good Prime Minister, because you won't make the decisions that are necessary. And I've always prepared to do that. I've earned similar replies when I decided that it wasn't the right decision to spend $90 billion of Australia's taxpayers' money on building French submarines, and that we needed to build nuclear-powered submarines. And I stood up for Australia then. If I believe what I'm doing is right, which is always, then I will stand up for that, and occasionally people will be disappointed. And when they're disappointed, well, they'll make remarks like you've seen.
There you go, the Prime Minister standing by these things, and one of the good points that he made there is, do you stand by your good decision, or are you just a crowd pleaser? Or do you make responsible decisions that people might not agree with because it's not their point of view many times. So a good choice there, I think, and good choice of words there as well. Well, of course, Shane Warne is to be remembered at MCG in that big memorial service. Let's see how the plannings and everything's going.
Elton John, Chris Martin, Robbie Williams, Ed Sheeran. Some of the biggest names in entertainment will play in the name of a man who entertained the world.
I mean, this is something, when you look at it from a concert point of view, that is almost unprecedented here in Australia. From a sportsman's night point of view, it's unprecedented.
Some stars won't be there in person, but many cricketing icons, Hollywood stars and homegrown celebrities will travel to the MCG for the service. An extra 10,000 tickets have been made available.
We've had 50,000 people take up the seat allocation so far, and we'd like to invite people to come, because this is going to be just one of the great events in the history of this city and this country.
One thing you would definitely want me to tell everyone and for him to know is how much he loved them, how much he loved the public.
the lives that he touched, I think, all around the world, says volumes to the effect that he had on the cricketing community.
Warne meant a lot to many, even those too young to see him play.
I just loved cricket and just loved Warnie and how he went about the game.
Harrison McLeod says he wants to honour Warnie's memory.
He was just like a symbol of cricket, really, and he just it meant a lot to Australia. And it's pretty sad when he died. Tomorrow
the tributes will move from outside the MCG to inside and on the hallowed turf where Warne was at home. Tom Maddox, ABC News.
Where he was at home, and he will be right there. And of course, look at that lineup for that concert. Oh my God. Yes, as the reporters were telling, that it is an unprecedented move where, you have these big icons all coming in there to remember a man who was so great, who entertained everyone. And what better place to have that than in his home ground? Well, of course, this forms part of Australia's history. This will go down in history. So has many things that have shaped Australia to be what it is today. So how much do we know of Australian history? How much of Australian history is being taught in our schools? Of course, we learn all about, the international wars and history as the historians teach us. The other day, we were at a function and we were just debating, well, not arguing, just debating on this point about history. And how much do people know about history? Well, it depends which country's history we're talking about, which era you're talking about, and of course, written history is only as good as someone who's written it. There are then documentaries which are made from documents that have been, sourced and looked at. Such was the case with the Kashmir files, where files had been sourced, documented evidence had been put forward to make that. And there was things in there that had never been brought out into the public. So when we look at history, we never know how much is out there on the surface, how much is available to the public today, and what were the things that people will never know about that actually took place. That's history. So right now, here's that news about how much of Australian history should be taught in our schools.
There's no shortage of opinions in this history class in Melbourne's diverse West.
I think if we're talking about the history of Christianity in our country, it was a colonial tool that was used by invaders.
My dad's in the Navy and my uncle's been in wars as well, fighting for Australia. So to me that brings me a bit of a nationalistic pride.
I also think that we should talk about, the First Nations soldiers that fought for us as well and then came back and were segregated.
But what Australian students learn about national pride, Christian heritage and the Anzacs could be about to change if the federal government gets its way.
The Western civilisation is something we should be proud of, and what it means to be Australian, to be proud of, is well and truly back in the curriculum.
When you read the national curriculum, especially history, it's too far towards the black armband view.
The federal government wants a national curriculum to focus more on the merits of Australia's Western liberal democracy. The proposed changes have met resistance, including from state education ministers.
Politicians often get very anxious about history. I think they think that it will influence young people's political views.
What we want students to think for themselves, and the richness in Indigenous perspectives and other perspectives is allow kids to learn the skills of dealing with differing worldviews.
I am proud to be Australian. I do think that, things happen in everyone's past.
There's a change in what young people want to see and what young people want to learn about, and that's the truth.
Education ministers will vote on the national curriculum in April. Cheryl Hall, ABC News.
And I really hope that they do the right thing, because history is history and it should not be influenced by politics. No way, because the truth and nothing but the truth should be there in history. And see, the danger today in the world, not only Australia or all around the world, is when history is not taught and not brought out, then youngsters grow up listening to few people in the community about what happened, how their group was marginalized, or how they were always wrong done and other things. So there are some people in the community who will always go with that, and that's what forms the opinion in the minds of these youngsters rather than what actually happened. So the truth, and every country should have their histories taught, so that people actually, students and youngsters know, and they form their own opinion, rather than some leaders in the community or some groups, sometimes religious groups, tending them into the beliefs that they get, because this is the people whom they hear. Also, social media, there's so much that's put out on social media, and people believe that's what it is, and this is what happened, this is how we were done wrong, the government did the wrong thing, we were minorities, and all kinds of things that happen there, many times which are not true, and many times which incite violence, which also puts one person against another person, because they form their opinion upon what's been told to them rather than what is the truth. So history and the lessons of history is very, very important. Sour as it may be, dark as it may be, but that's what happened, that's what people need to know about. Well, that's my opinion anyway. Well, right now we'll go to Daily India Report, and time permitting, there's some other news which we will cover, but because we'll have to join in the Parliament sitting at 9:30, so right now let's take a look at the Daily India Report with Mansu, and then time permitting we will look at some of the other news there as well.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, Sri Lanka is in urgent talks with India for another $1.5 billion credit line. The southern island neighbouring country of 22 million people is struggling to pay for essential imports. Sri Lankan currency has devalued significantly in 2 years. It is also seeking help from global lenders. Sri Lanka has sought an additional credit line of $1.5 billion from India to import essentials, the island nation's central bank governor said. Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis in decades. Sri Lanka, comprising 22 million people, is struggling to pay for essential imports after a 70% drop in foreign exchange reserves. Fuel is in short supply, food prices are rocketing, and protests have broken out as Sri Lanka's government prepares for talks with the International Monetary Fund amid concerns over the country's ability to pay back foreign debt. The new line is on top of the $1 billion support extended by India to help pay for critical imports when Sri Lankan Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa travelled to New Delhi in March 2022. India's support for the roiled Sri Lankan economy comes after previous administrations led by the powerful Rajapaksa family drew the island nation closer to China during the past decade, leading to unease in New Delhi. In addition to the credit lines, India this year extended a $400 million currency swap and a $500 million credit line for fuel purchases for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's imports stalled, causing shortages of many essential items after foreign currency reserves fell to $2.31 billion in February. Sri Lanka is just off India's southern tip and has to repay the debt of about $4 billion during the rest of this year, including a $1 billion international sovereign bond that matures in July. Faced with a swiftly deepening crisis, President Rajapaksa has also sought help from Beijing, including a request to restructure debt payments. His government is negotiating $2.5 billion in credit support from China, with a decision expected in the next few weeks. Finance Minister Rajapaksa is set to fly to Washington, D.C. next month to start talks with the IMF for a rescue plan and also to seek support from the World Bank. US lowers COVID-19 travel advisory for India from level 3 to level 1. The US Center for Disease Control and Prevention has eased its COVID-19 travel advisories for India, taking it from level 3 to level 1. The CDC in its advisory said it has changed its COVID-19 travel recommendation for India to level 1, which is low risk, from level 3, which is high risk. While giving key information for travellers to India, the CDC said make sure you are vaccinated and up to date with your COVID-19 vaccines before travelling to India. Even if you are up to date with your COVID-19 vaccines, you may still be at risk of getting and spreading COVID-19. Anyone 2 years or older should probably wear a well-fitting mask in indoor public spaces. Follow all requirements and recommendations in India. CDC uses travel health notices to alert travelers and other audiences to combat health threats around the world and advise on how to protect themselves. Chief of French Navy Admiral Pierre Vandier is on a 3-day visit to India. Due to the crisis in Ukraine, both sides are expected to deliberate on the possible implications of the conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. Chief of French Navy Admiral Pierre Vandier is on his 3-day visit to India from March 28th with an aim to explore further boosting bilateral maritime cooperation, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. As his visit comes in the midst of the crisis in Ukraine, both sides are expected to deliberate on the possible implications of the conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. Admiral Vandier is scheduled to hold wide-ranging talks with his Indian counterpart Admiral R. Harikumar as well as Army Chief General M.M. Naravane and Chief of Air Staff Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary. The visit by the French Navy chief comes over a month after India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar travelled to Paris. During the visit, Jaishankar said India looks at France as a trusted partner in countering myriad security challenges from the seabed to space and from cyber to oceans. The maritime cooperation between India and France has witnessed a major expansion in the last few years. The Indian and French navies in April last year carried out a mega war game in the Arabian Sea in the backdrop of growing concern over China's growing maritime presence in the Indian Ocean region. President Ramnath Kovind conferred Padma Awards on 74 distinguished personalities, including BJP leader and former Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister late Kalyan Singh, and actor Victor Banerjee for the year 2022 at a civil investiture ceremony held at Rashtrapati Bhavan. Indian President Ramnath Kovind conferred Padma Awards on 74 distinguished personalities, including BJP leader and former Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister late Kalyan Singh and Olympic gold medalist Neeraj Chopra for the year 2022 at the Civil Investiture Ceremony 2 at Rashtrapati Bhavan. This year, 128 Padma Awards are being presented in 2 civil investiture ceremonies. The first civil investiture ceremony was held on March 21st when 54 personalities were awarded the honour. Amongst the prominent awardees at the second investiture ceremony were Padma Vibhushan recipients, former Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister late Kalyan Singh and classical vocalist Prabha Atre. Padma Bhushan recipients being actor Victor Banerjee and Krishnamurthy Ella and Suchitra Krishna Ella of Bharat Biotech, the maker of coronavirus vaccine Covaxin. Tokyo Olympic gold medalist Neeraj Chopra and singers Sulochana Chavan and Sonu Nigam received Padma Shri from the President. Tokyo Paralympics gold medalist shuttler Pramod Bhagat and gold medalist javelin thrower Sumit Until also received the prestigious Padma Shri award in the field of sports. Ireland's Professor Rutger Kortenhorst also received Padma Shri for his contribution to popularizing Sanskrit in Irish schools. The Padma Awards are the highest civilian honors of India, announced annually on the eve of Republic Day to recognize achievements in all fields of activities or disciplines where an element of public service is involved. The awards are conferred in 3 categories: Padma Vibhushan, Padma Bhushan and Padma Shri. Padma Vibhushan awards are conferred for exceptional and distinguished service, Padma Bhushan for distinguished service of higher order and Padma Shri for distinguished service. This year's list of Padma Awards includes 4 Padma Vibhushan, 17 Padma Bhushan and 107 Padma Shri awards. 34 of the Padma awardees are women. The list of awardees also includes 10 persons from the category of foreigners, NRI, PIO, OCI and 13 posthumous awardees. Wheat exports from India are booming to help ease global shortages. India is a top global producer of wheat after China and has the potential to ship 12 million tons to the world market in the 2022-23 year. In a world where people are concerned more than ever about food shortages and rising inflation, India's warehouses are brimming over with grain and the country's farmers are gearing up for yet another record harvest. India is the top global producer of wheat after China and has the potential to ship 12 million tons to the world market in the 2022-23 year, the biggest on record, according to the median of 5 estimates in a Bloomberg survey of traders, millers and analysts. That compares with shipments of 8.5 million tons in 2021-22, US Department of Agricultural data show. Prices of farm commodities were already on a tear before the Russian invasion of Ukraine as drought shriveled global harvests and demand increased, helping send world food costs to the highest on record. The war made matters even worse because it has choked shipments from one of the planet's top producing regions, cutting off more than a quarter of the world's wheat supplies. Benchmark wheat prices in Chicago surged to an all-time high of $13.635 a bushel this month after the Russian invasion, compared with an average of only around $5.50 a bushel in the 5 years through the day preceding the attack. Tightening supply and rising prices for grains from major exporting countries have made Indian wheat competitive for the first time in years. With ballooning inventories after 5 straight record crops, India has a huge exportable surplus that will be crucial for importers in North Africa and the Middle East, where soaring food prices sparked violent uprisings more than a decade ago. While India has tended to ship wheat mostly to neighboring countries such as Bangladesh and to some Middle Eastern markets, exporters are now likely to find buyers across Africa and in other areas of the Middle Eastern region. Director S.S. Rajamouli's RRR, starring Junior NTR and Ram Charan, has hit the jackpot at the box office. The film collected a whopping rupees 500 crore in just 3 days. Director S.S. Rajamouli's RRR has achieved the unthinkable. The epic war drama collected a whopping rupees 500 crore at the box office worldwide in just 3 days and is still going strong. The film has set a new benchmark in the trade circuit. RRR is single-handedly pulling the crowd back to the theatres in the post-COVID-19 pandemic era. The film is expected to create new box office records. RRR is a fictional war drama based on the lives of Telugu freedom fighters Alluri Sitharama Raju and Komaram Bhim.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as you can hear that the bell's going, so the parliament is about to begin. So as soon as it begins, we will bring to you all the proceedings from there today until and then at 10 o'clock we have the real estate update with Usa Chandra of GlobeNet Realty. So today we looked at the federal budget, and of course there have been some very good announcements, and of course we'll take a look at what Queensland Parliament thinks of the budget, and of course I believe the lines would be that the federal government has not done enough for the local government here, meaning the Queensland government, because the allocation of the funds, especially in the health sector, is what will be in question as well. So, right now the Parliament TV, the Parliament is now beginning session.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Honourable members, I respectfully acknowledge that we are sitting today on the land of Aboriginal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I thank them as First Australians for their careful custodianship of the land over countless generations. We are very fortunate in this country to have two of the world's oldest continuing living cultures in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, whose lands, winds and waters we all now share. Yeah. Are there any matters of privilege? Honourable members, I've received advice from the member for Ujaroo, Dr Mark Robinson MP, who was absent on the 17th of March, that he will also be absent from the sittings of the House on the 29th, 30th and possibly the 31st of March 2022. The member's notification complies with Standing Order 263A. Honourable members, the opposition has circulated amendments proposed to be moved to the Public Health and Other Legislation Extension of Expiring Provisions Amendment Bill 2022. Opposition Amendment Number 2 seeks to amend the Public Health Act 2005 to insert a new section in relation to publication of information on the Department's website following a public health direction by the Chief Health Officer. I note that an amendment of the same substance was moved and negatived to the Public Health and Other Legislation Further Extension of Expiring Provisions Amendment Bill 2021, which was passed in the same session of this Parliament. Standing Order 150 provides that no amendment shall be moved which is substantially the same as one already negatived by the House. Therefore, I rule Opposition Amendment Number 2 out of order. I note that other amendments circulated are similar to amendments circulated to another bill. However, as leave was required and not given in respect to those previously circulated amendments, the same question rule does not apply. And honourable members, I wish to advise that we'll be visited in the gallery this morning by students and teachers from Highlands Christian College in the electorate of Toowoomba South, City Point Christian College in the electorate of Mansfield, and Earnshaw State College in the electorate of Nudgee. Members, it is now time for our condolence motion. I call the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that this House desires to place on record its appreciation of the services rendered to this state by the late Honourable Demetrius Foras AM, a former member of the Speaker and Speaker of the Parliament of Queensland. That Mr Speaker be requested to convey to the family of the deceased gentleman the above resolution, together with an expression of the sympathy and sorrow of the members of the Parliament of Queensland in the loss that they have sustained. Mr Speaker, the Honourable Demetrius Foras AM, best known as Jim, was born in Greece, the birthplace of democracy, on the 8th of March 1938. Jim immigrated to Australia at the age of 10 and attended the Southport School on the Gold Coast. He went on to attain a Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Economics degree at the University of Queensland. Jim worked as a chemist and later as a marketing economist for the Department of Primary Industries. I understand that Jim also gained a reputation as an expert on superannuation and in the 1970s was a member of the State Service Superannuation Board. Jim was a good sportsman as a surf lifesaver and playing rugby union for the University of Queensland and rugby league for Souths. Mr Speaker, in the mid-1960s, Jim joined the Labor Party and became active in his branch. Following the 1974 state election, Jim was encouraged by the Leader of the Opposition, Tom Burns, to seek pre-selection for South Brisbane. South Brisbane had historically been a Labor seat, but the Liberals' Colin Lamont won it in 1974. Jim took back the seat for the ALP in the 1977 election, becoming the first Greek-born member of an Australian Parliament. He won again in 1980 and 1983. In 1986, an electoral redistribution merged the neighbouring electorate of Kurilpa into South Brisbane. Anne Warner gained ALP pre-selection for the redrawn seat, and Jim left the Parliament at the election in November 1986. He then began working for Australia's Human Rights Commission. But it wasn't long before politics came calling again, and Jim was encouraged by the ALP to seek pre-selection for Ashgrove. Jim won Ashgrove from the Liberals' Alan Sherlock in December 1989 on the coattails of Wayne Goss's historic victory. Jim held Ashgrove at 5 more elections before retiring in 2006. Mr Speaker, Jim served in many parliamentary and political party roles. During his first stint, he was a member of the Committee of Subordinate Legislation. From 1977 to 1986, he was an opposition spokesperson in portfolios including welfare services, treasury, industry, small business, youth and ethnic affairs. In his second stint, Jim was Speaker of this House from February 1990 to April 1996. Jim also served as Deputy Speaker from 2000 to 2006. Mr Speaker, after retiring from Parliament, I understand Jim devoted time to charitable pursuits. He also contributed to committee inquiries into parliamentary-related matters. In 2001, Jim was awarded the Centenary Medal in recognition of his contribution to Australian society and to government. In 2014, Jim was made a member of the Order of Australia for significant service to the Parliament of Queensland and as an advocate for homeless youth and social justice. He was awarded life membership of the Great Australian Labor Party in 2007. Jim was an energetic and passionate person, as these awards recognised. His family can be absolutely proud of his life. I note the presence in the gallery today of his partner Tanya Farrington and Tanya's friends Deborah, Susan and Kerry. Mr Speaker, the Honourable Demetrius Foras AM passed away on the 12th of November, aged 83. A funeral service to celebrate his life was held at the Greek Orthodox Church of St George, South Brisbane on the 29th of November. I place on record the government's thanks for the years of service that Jim gave to the institutions of our democracy and to the Queensland community. And on behalf of the government, I take this opportunity to extend my sympathy and that of this House to Jim's family and to all of his friends.
I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, today the House acknowledges the life and service of one of its most distinguished servants, Demetrius, known as Jim Foras. Since 1859, this House has seen 37 individuals serve as Speaker. 2 have served on 2 occasions. They have all done so with varying degrees of success, but many walk the fine line between their responsibilities to this House and, where applicable, their responsibilities to their party. The measure of their success is how, even after the passing of the years, they are remembered. Some were never able to shake off the constraints of political partisanship, while others were more willing and able to embrace the challenging role of being a bipartisan Speaker in an environment driven by political partisanship. Jim Foras can be placed in the second category, as he forged for himself a reputation as a defender of the House and its members, and as one who sought to uphold the supremacy of the Parliament itself. Jim served as Speaker of this House for just over 6 years and then served for an additional 6.5 years as Deputy Speaker. Few could have imagined at the time of his birth in a small village in rural Greece in 1938 that he would rise to the position .
And ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have a bit of a transmission problem there. Let's see if we can get that guy again.
In post-war Australia, Greece experienced a protracted civil war. My father volunteered to fight against the communists who later took over our village. In 1949, the civil war was still raging. Against my mother's wishes, my older brother and I were sent to Australia to be cared for by my father's uncle, who owned Theodore's Cafe in Southport. I was only 10. He attended TSS and graduated from the University of Queensland in Science and Economics before working in the DPI. Jim joined the ALP in 1966, a time of developing social and political change in Australia. Against this background, he made his foray into politics in 1977, winning back the traditional Labor seat of South Brisbane from the Liberal Party. It is interesting to note that from his election in that year, he served in 4 shadow ministerial roles, including Shadow Treasurer, over the next 9 years. During this time, he aligned himself with the reform group within the ALP, seeking to bring about internal change to improve the party's electoral prospects. It was in 1986 that he faced a setback, losing pre-selection to his colleague Anne Warner, whose seat of Coorulpa had been abolished in the 1985 redistribution. Out of the House, Jim furthered his interest in the welfare of migrants by working on various projects through the Anglican Church and on homelessness through the Human Rights Commission's Vertican report. In 1989, Jim was elected to the seat of Ashgrove, joining 27 other ALP members elected for the first time in supporting the incoming Goss government. His return to the House saw him elevated to the position of Speaker, a role he held until Labor lost office in 1986. As John Warner wrote in the Australasian Journal of Politics and History in his review of 1995, the power brokers in the party neglected to discuss the change with Jim, who was not about to vacate the position. He dug in and continued in that role with great service. The appointment was short-lived as the Goss government was defeated in 1996, but Jim continued to serve as member for Ashgrove for a further 10 years, during which time he served as Deputy Speaker. Throughout his time in Parliament, Jim was a champion of the Parliament and its members. He believed in what Parliament could achieve. Jim was proud of his Greek heritage and held a deep commitment to family. He was a proud supporter of Australia's migrant community and a believer in the importance of social justice. He served his community, his party and the Parliament with great distinction. Today, the opposition joins the Premier in offering our deepest condolences to his wife, to his partner Tanya Farrington and his family, and thanks them for allowing the people of Queensland to share some time with Jim.
I call the member for Cooper.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to contribute to the condolence motion for Demetrius Jim Forrest. I met Jim initially 2 years ago during my campaign for this seat, which was formerly the seat of Ashgrove, which Jim held from 1989 until his retirement from politics in 2006. My initial impression of Jim was this little old Greek guy who was just so incredibly energetic and enthusiastic and optimistic. He valued his relationship with his family, his neighbours, his community, his Greek community and his political allies and acquaintances. His ability to recall people's names, their lives, their stories was really quite remarkable. Jim was 81 when I met him, and I feel like I should be saying that I wish I had have known him in his prime, but quite frankly, Jim and his energy in his prime would have been absolutely terrifying if his energy in his 80s was anything to go by. Jim was an integral part of my campaign team. Apart from the former member for Cooper, Kate Jones, I would say that Jim was my most vocal advocate on the campaign. Following my endorsement, I went to coffee with Jim at a local cafe, and it was supposed to be an hour tops meeting, but it probably took 30 minutes before we even managed to sit down because Jim knew everybody. He would walk around the cafe and stop at every table to have a chat, and I learned at that first engagement that there was no such thing as a quick meeting with Jim. Jim was quoted as saying the most important considerations that people have when they go into the voting booth is who you are, what you've done and why you want to run. And Jim took a real and genuine interest in these areas with me. He was particularly interested in my motivations for running, and by the end of our meeting he'd promised to come back out of retirement to campaign for me, and he did. Of course, now I realise that Jim was never actually really in retirement. He was always up to something, but he really took it on as his mission to have me elected. He handwrote letters of support. He letterboxed. He came out with me at street stalls in the mornings. He attended every single day with me on pre-poll. He never fatigued. I actually wonder if there was this cohort of people who voted for me simply so that Jim would let them go and get on with the rest of their day. And he was so persuasive, Speaker. His ability to strike up a conversation with anyone of any age and to find a point of connection was unlike anything I've seen before and may never see again. Jim would talk often about love, that you have to love people to be in this role, and he was right. You can't fake that stuff. He did love people, whether he agreed with them or not. He had an authentic care for others and their rights and interests. And as the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition have outlined this morning, Jim has an impressive story. He was born in Kalavrita in Greece, where he lived through the German invasion during the Second World War. We didn't speak much about that time, but one story that he has shared is being in the bathroom when he witnessed his neighbour's house struck by an aerial bomb. His mother grabbed him half naked and the rest of the children and fled into the hills. When they returned later that day, Jim described how there was nothing left, no house, no people. The livestock had all perished. I understand it was shortly after that Jim's father directed that Jim and his older brother would migrate to Australia. Jim's mother didn't want them to go. She allegedly tried everything to stop her husband, including trying to have him arrested. But in that place and in those times, the husband made all the decisions, and Jim and his brother accordingly migrated to Queensland in 1948, when Jim was just 10 years of age.
And what a wonderful thing that he did in those days. And when you listen to those stories, you know how challenging those would be. So that is Miss Jonty Bush, ILP member for Cooper, the seat that at one time Jim held. And our condolences to him as a great man that he was. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have to cease the transmission at this point in time. We will join the Parliament maybe a little bit later on, because at 10 a.m. we have the weekly real estate update with Usha Chandra coming right up. And if time permitting, we might saw the ending part of the Parliament sitting for today. By that time, we might be moving into question time for today. Remember, in question time, members are given 3 minutes to respond. And after that, the speaker calls that your time is up. And during that 3 minutes, sometimes there are interjections from the person who is, or the member who has asked that question as well. Sometimes it's very, very interesting to watch all these proceedings. It is very, well, right now it's time to say goodbye from this segment. We'll see you back very soon with the weekly real estate update with Usa Chandra of GlobeNet Realty, and time permitting, we will join the Parliament sitting on there. Otherwise, we'll bring all the update to you tomorrow, together with the response from Queensland Parliament on the federal budget, as to see what their take is on the federal budget. What does it mean for Queensland and Queenslanders? Until then, it's goodbye from me.